In our series of lectures on the Constitution of India, today we will be covering the directive principles of state policy which are contained in part 4 of the Constitution. First of all, we will see what is the nature of these directive principles. Are they justiciable? Are they enforceable by a court of law? The answer is available in Article 37 itself, which provides in the first paragraph that the provisions in this part shall not be enforced by any court. Clearly then, the directive principles of state policy are non-justiciable. These principles cannot be enforced by any court of law. What is the second characteristic of these principles? The same article, that is Article 37, further lays down that the principles laid down in this part are fundamental in the governance of the country, and it shall be the duty of the state to apply these principles in making laws. Article 38 says that the state shall strive to promote welfare of the people by securing a social order in which justice, social, economic and political shall inform all institutions of national life. So this is the first directive principle, and it strives for promotion of welfare of people through justice by securing a social order in which justice shall inform all institutions of national life. Article 39 has various clauses. In the first clause, it says that the state shall direct its policy towards securing that citizens, men and women equally, have right to an adequate means of livelihood. It seeks to provide a right to all citizens. And what is the right about? This right talks about an adequate means of livelihood. Clause B of Article 39 talks about ownership and control of material resources. It provides that state shall direct its policy towards securing that ownership and control of material resources of the community are so distributed as best to subserve the common good. What are the material resources of the community? Land, air, water, space, minerals under the surface of land. All these are material resources of the community. And clause B of Article 39 provides that ownership and control of material resources must be distributed, and it should be distributed in such a way that it subserves the common good. Clause C of Article 39 provides for operation of economic system in a particular way. It says that the economic system should be operated in such a way that it does not result in concentration of wealth and means of production to common detriment. This clause does not prohibit concentration of wealth and means of production. There can be concentration of wealth, there can be concentration of means of production. However, it cannot be in such a way and to such an extent that it causes common detriment, common harm. If it is harmful to the community, then such concentration should not be allowed. Clause D of Article 39, equal pay for equal work. The state shall direct its policy towards securing that there is equal pay for equal work for both men and women. This is an important principle, and this has been implemented by the state. A law known as Equal Remuneration Act was enacted in 1976. The last clause of Article 39 provides for protection against exploitation. It says that state shall direct its policy towards securing that childhood and youth are protected against exploitation. It talks about protection of childhood and protection of youth against exploitation. Article 39A provides for free legal aid. 39A provides free legal aid so as to ensure that opportunities for securing justice are not denied to any citizen by reason of economic or other disabilities. Every citizen should be able to get an opportunity to seek justice. This article does not talk about getting justice. This article talks about ensuring an opportunity to every citizen to seek justice. And he should not be denied this opportunity by reason of economic or other disabilities. This article was inserted by the 42nd Amendment Act of 1976. By this amendment, 3 articles were inserted in this chapter, in this part. This is the first one. And subsequently, in the year 1987, there has been an implementation of this article by way of the Legal Services Authorities Act. This act provides for free legal aid to various categories of people mentioned in section 12 of this act. Article 40 talks about village panchayats. State shall take steps to organize village panchayats and to endow them with powers and authority to enable them to function as units of self-government. This article says that the state shall take steps not only to organize village panchayats, that is one part, organization of village panchayats, that is setting up of village panchayats, but that is not enough. These village panchayats should also be given power and authority. And power and authority to what extent? It should be to such an extent that these panchayats are able to function as units of self-government. This is important. The panchayats should be able to function as units of self-government. That much power and authority should be given to them. Now, as far as organization of village panchayats is concerned, we have a setup provided by the 73rd Amendment Act of the Constitution in the year 1992, whereby a new part was inserted in the Constitution and a complete organizational setup has been laid out in that part. However, as far as powers and authority are concerned, this aspect has been left to the discretion of the state legislatures, and there we find that there is still lack of power and authority because different state legislatures have different laws and most of them have been reluctant to impart sufficient powers and authority to village panchayats. Article 41, it says, state shall within its economic capacity and development make effective provision for securing, and then there are 3 rights: right to work, right to education, right to public assistance in cases of unemployment, old age, sickness, disablement and undeserved want. Article 41 talks of 3 rights: right to work, right to education, right to public assistance. But actually these are not rights in the sense we have fundamental rights. They are still directive principles of state policy. The state has been asked to make effective provision for securing these rights. So these rights have not actually been provided by the Constitution. The Constitution is simply asking the state to secure these rights, and the state has to make efforts within its economic capacity and development to provide these rights to the citizens. Article 42 talks about humane conditions of work and maternity relief. It says, states shall make provision for securing just and humane conditions of work and for maternity relief. As far as maternity relief is concerned, we have an act, Maternity Benefit Act of 1961, which provides numerous benefits under the caption of maternity benefit. Recently, there was an amendment also to this act, which provides for 26 weeks of maternity leave. The quantum of leave has been increased from 12 weeks to 26 weeks, and that is at par with most European countries. So this is certainly a welfare measure enacted by the state, and this law has been enacted under Article 42. Article 43 talks about providing work, a living wage, a decent standard of life, and full enjoyment of labor, leisure, and social and cultural opportunities to all workers, whether in the agricultural sector or in the industrial sector or elsewhere, like construction activities, etc. So, states shall endeavor to secure to all workers work, a living wage, a decent standard of life, and full enjoyment of leisure and social and cultural opportunities. And you should not hear that a living wage is something more than the minimum wage. It should be something higher than a minimum wage. Amendments to Minimum Wages Act 1948 and Payment of Bonus Act 1965 are some of the acts which have been enacted under this provision. Second part of this Article 43 talks about promotion of cottage industries in rural areas. It says, the state shall endeavor to promote cottage industries on an individual or cooperative basis in rural areas. Cottage industries should be promoted whether on an individual basis or on cooperative basis. Under this provision, Khadi and Village Industries Commission Act was enacted in the year 1956, and various boards have been set up under it, like the Handloom Board, the Silk Board, etc. Article 43A was inserted by the 42nd Amendment Act. This is the second of the directive principles which were inserted by this Amendment Act, and it provides for participation of workers in management of industry. It says, states shall take steps to secure participation of workers in management of undertakings, establishments which are engaged in industry. This participation of workers in management is different from allowing workers to form trade unions. Actually, trade unions normally work against the management. Trade union is a platform where the workers can collectively bargain against the management. And the trade unions have been there in India for the last full 1 century. However, Article 43A is not talking of that aspect. It is talking of giving participation to the workers in management itself. not as an adversary of the management or the opposite side of the management, but a part of the management. It talks about securing participation of workers in the management itself. Next article is Article 43B. This was inserted by the 97th Amendment Act in 2012. And this article talks about promotion of cooperative societies. The article provides that the state shall endeavor to promote voluntary formation, autonomous functioning, democratic control, and professional management of cooperative societies. Now, this article goes beyond the simple pronouncement that cooperative societies will be promoted. It also tells the state as to how to go about it. The cooperative societies should be formed voluntarily. They should function in an autonomous way. The control should be decided democratically, and the cooperative societies should be managed professionally. This is the roadmap for promotion of cooperative societies. Article 44, a very important article, where the state is asked to endeavor, that is to make efforts to secure for citizens a uniform civil code throughout the territory of India. In fact, there have been numerous judgments from the Supreme Court which have also asked the state, that is the legislature, to secure a uniform civil code throughout the territory of India. However, we have not been able to make much progress in achieving a uniform civil code so far. Early childhood care and education. Article 45 provides that the state should make efforts to provide early childhood care and education to all children until they complete the age of 6 years. To begin with, this article contained provisions relating to education of children between the age of 6 to 14 years. However, since the education of children between the age of 6 to 14 years has now been shifted to the fundamental right part, that has been made a fundamental right under Article 21A. Therefore, this Article 45 has been substituted, and now it provides for early childhood care and education of children up to the age of 6 years. And from 6 to 14 years, the education of children is covered by the fundamental right of Article 21A. Article 46 talks about promotion of weaker sections. It says, the state shall promote with special care educational and economic interests of weaker sections, in particular of SCs and STs. And it is for the first time that the Constitution is talking about the economic interests of weaker sections. We have provisions at many places which talks of educational interests of weaker sections, or interests of educationally weaker sections. Here, for the first time, there is a provision for those weaker sections which are weak in the economic sense, in the economic field. This article has been implemented through various enactments and amendments. The 65th Amendment Act provided for a commission for SCs and STs. The 89th Amendment Act provided for bifurcation of this commission in two. That is, the National Commission for Scheduled Caste is one, the National Commission for Scheduled Tribes is another. In 1989, an act for prevention of atrocities against the SCs and STs was passed, known as SCs and STs Prevention of Atrocities Act. Next we come to Article 47, which talks about primary duties of the state. What are the primary duties of the state? There are three duties which are laid out in Article 47. The first is raising of the level of nutrition. The second is raising of the standard of living of people. And the third is the improvement of public health. These are to be regarded as the primary duties by the state, and it should do everything possible to raise the level of nutrition, to raise the standard of living, and to improve public health. The second part of this article says that state shall endeavor to bring about prohibition of consumption of intoxicating drinks and drugs injurious to health. The state should make endeavor to bring about prohibition of consumption. However, unfortunately, prohibition of consumption is a far cry. In India, only a couple of states have implemented this policy, and everywhere else intoxicating drugs are available in plenty, causing injury to the health of people as well as to their family lives. Article 48. The state shall endeavor to organize agriculture and animal husbandry on modern and scientific lines. And in its second part, it provides for taking steps for prohibition of cattle slaughter. The state shall take steps for preserving and improving the breeds and prohibiting slaughter of cows and other milch and draught cattle. Article 48A. Once again, it should be noted that it was inserted by the 42nd Amendment. This is the last of the three, and we can now recap that the three articles which were inserted by the 42nd Amendment. The first one was 39A, which provides for free legal aid. The second was 43A, which provides for participation of workers in management of industry. And the third one is 48A, which provides for protection and improvement of environment. Article 48A says that states shall endeavor to protect and improve environment and to safeguard forests and wildlife. It should also be noted that this article is talking not only of protection of environment, it is also talking of improvement of environment. So it is going one step ahead of protection. Protection is a steady state position. This article exhorts the state to make efforts to even improve the environment. And this requirement has been taken very seriously because of its adverse effects all over the globe, and various laws have been enacted. The first one is Wildlife Protection Act of 1972, then the Forest Conservation Act of 1980, the Environment Protection Act of 1986, the Water Prevention and Control of Pollution Act of 1974, and the Air Prevention and Control of Pollution Act 1981. Article 49 talks about protection of artistic or historic monuments. This article says that it shall be the obligation of the state to protect every monument or place or object of artistic or historic interest declared by Parliament to be of national importance. We can note from here that firstly, it is the Parliament who shall declare a monument or a place or an object to be of national importance. Once it is so declared by the Parliament, then it becomes the obligation of the state to protect such monument or place or object from spoliation or destruction. And these monuments or places or objects must be of artistic or historic interest. An act was passed in the year 1958 for protection of historical and ancient monuments and archaeological sites. The name of the act is Ancient and Historical Monuments and Archaeological Sites and Remains Act of 1958. It is under this act that the Archaeological Survey of India takes steps to protect ancient and historical monuments. Next we come to Article 50. It talks about separation of judiciary from the executive in public services. This article says that the state shall take steps to separate judiciary from the executive in public services of the state. It is not talking of separation of powers between the three organs of the state, which is a topic of a higher level. Separation of powers between the judiciary and the executive and the legislature. It's not talking of that. Article 50 is talking of separation of judiciary from the executive in public services of the state. When the Constitution was enacted in the year 1950, the executive authorities like the district magistrate, the sub-divisional magistrate, the Tehsildar, they had numerous judicial powers. And this article was enacted with a view to separate these judicial powers from the executive authorities. As an implementation of this article, the Parliament passed the Criminal Procedure Code of 1973, and under this code, judicial powers have been almost taken away from the executive authorities like the district magistrate, the sub-divisional magistrate, the Tehsildar, etc. Still, there are some powers, some judicial powers with these executive authorities, but most of the powers have been taken away and have been given to the judicial authorities, judicial magistrates, etc. Lastly, we come to Article 51. This article talks about promotion of international peace and security. This article has various components. It says, the state shall endeavour to promote international peace and security. The state shall endeavour to foster respect for international law and treaty obligations. The state shall endeavour to encourage settlement of international disputes by arbitration. Having gone through all the directive principles as specified in Articles 38 to Articles 51, we shall now have a short discussion on the scope and importance of directive principles. We shall see the relationship between the fundamental rights and the directive principles. How do the directive principles compare with the fundamental rights? We are aware that the fundamental rights are justiciable. The directive principles are non-justiciable. Nonetheless, the directive principles are fundamental in the governance of the country. In its landmark judgment in Minerva Mills versus Union of India, delivered in 1980, The Supreme Court laid down the following three statements of law while deliberating on the relationship between the fundamental rights and the directive principles. Firstly, harmony and balance between the fundamental rights and the directive principles is an essential feature of the basic structure of the Constitution. Secondly, they together constitute the core of commitment to social revolution. And thirdly, the Constitution is founded on the bedrock of the balance between the fundamental rights and the directive principles.